Welcome back to Smith History, separating the Smith from the myth. The only podcast where the stories are true, the details are negotiable, and the punchlines are usually delivered by one of my brothers, whether I ask for them or not. Today's episode takes us back to the early 1990s, a time when the NBA was electric. The shorts were short, the dunks were thunderous, and the Richfield Coliseum still stood proudly in the middle of a field, somewhere between Cleveland and Are We Lost Yet? And at the center of today's tale, my brother Jeff, his wife Irene, and fortunately there was another witness, our youngest brother Kyle, the official court stenographer of Smith history. Because if Kyle had not been there that night, this story would have slipped through the cracks of time like so many priceless Smith artifacts. If Kyle had not been at that game, this story would have evaporated into the Richfield rafters like the smell of stale popcorn. But he was there, and he knew, even back then, long before podcasts existed, back when I was doing a fake radio show on WKBR, that someday this moment would need to be preserved. And preserved it shall be. Jeff certainly wasn't going to tell it. Maybe he thought it wasn't important. Maybe he thought it was embarrassing. Maybe he just didn't think it rose to the level of Smith history worthy. But Kyle knows better. Kyle knows a Smith story when he sees one. And it takes us back to a magical era, the early 1990s when the NBA was at its peak. The Richfield Coliseum still stood like a concrete cathedral in the middle of nowhere. And my brother Jeff was out there doing what he does best, turning an ordinary night into a Smith family classic. Now this story almost didn't survive, not because it wasn't good, not because it wasn't memorable, but because Jeff, God bless him, is not exactly the family's designated historian. If it were up to him, this tale would have been filed under, it's no big deal. Today's Smith story has everything. NBA nostalgia, a historic arena, a tense confrontation, a mama bear intervention, and not one, but two legendary Smith one-liners. So buckle up. We're going to the Richfield Coliseum, where the Cavaliers were good, the fans were loud, and Jeff, well, he was Jeff. Before I get to the confrontation, the one-liners, and the moment that created a Smith family catchphrase, we need to set the stage. The Richfield Coliseum, a building so iconic that even now, decades after its demolition, Cavs fans still speak of it with the same reverence archaeologists reserve for the ruins of ancient civilizations. It opened in 1974, a massive modern arena plopped down in the middle of rural Ohio, like somebody accidentally dropped it off a UFO. It was ahead of its time. Wide concourses, great sight lines, and acoustics that could make a crowd sound like a jet engine. And in the early 1990s, it was the place to watch NBA basketball. This was the era of Jordan, Magic, Bird, and Kareem. The league was stacked with legends. And while the Cavs weren't hoisting trophies yet, LeBron was still in elementary school, they had a roster that could play with anybody. Mark Price, the quiet assassin, Brad Daugherty, the smooth big man, Larry Nance, the original dunk contest royalty, Craig Elo, forever guarding Michael Jordan in slow-motion replays. Hot Rod Williams, the fan favorite with the best nickname in the league. The Cavs of that era were good, really good. Good enough that a game at the Coliseum was an event. On this particular night, Jeff, Irene, and Kyle had good seats. The kind of seats where you can smell the popcorn, hear the sneakers squeak, and convince yourself that if the coach would put you in, you could probably give him 4 solid minutes of hustle. Now, Kyle told me this story over 30 years ago, and I don't remember the exact year. But Kyle telling the story, the atmosphere was electric. The Cavs needed a win. The crowd was really into the game. The Coliseum was rocking. And Jeff was actively participating. If cheering were an Olympic sport, Jeff would have a medal. He was up, he was down, he was clapping, he was yelling, he was living and dying with every possession. He was the human embodiment of the Cleveland Cavaliers mascot. And behind him sat a man who apparently did not share Jeff's enthusiasm. Maybe Jeff blocked his view. Maybe the guy was having a bad day. Maybe he was one of those fans who thinks the proper way to enjoy a sporting event is to sit silently and contemplate the futility of existence. But whatever the reason, the man was growing increasingly agitated. And Kyle, ever the observer, sensed something brewing. Late in the game, with the tension rising and the crowd roaring, Jeff stood up once again to cheer. And that's when it happened. The man behind Jeff snapped. He yelled loudly, aggressively, and the kind of tone that suggests he'd been rehearsing this moment in his head for several quarters. He told Jeff, "Sit down and shut up." Now Jeff has delivered some memorable lines in his day. "I don't see Mike Hill on the horizon," and "Remember me, boys." But on this night, Jeff reached into the depths, turned around, looked this man straight in the eye, and delivered a line that would echo through Smith history forever. "Don't ruin my fun." It was a masterpiece, a verbal Mona Lisa, a phrase so pure, so simple, so Smithsonian, so perfectly Jeff that it instantly entered the Smith Family Hall of Fame. Kyle's ears perked up like a hunting dog. He knew he had just witnessed history. Now, the angry fan did not appreciate Jeff's poetic reply. In fact, it enraged him. He stood up, he leaned forward, he prepared to escalate. And that's when Irene, sweet, kind, gentle Irene, transformed into a force of nature. She became a mama bear, a guardian angel with attitude. A woman who was not about to let anyone ruin her fun, her husband's fun, or her brother-in-law's fun. She stepped between Jeff and the angry fan with the confidence of someone who has already decided how this ends. And the angry fan backed down. Because even the bravest man knows you don't mess with Irene when she's protecting one of her cubs, and that includes Jeff. And because the Smiths never leave a moment without a quotable line, Irene delivered her own classic. "There's an a-hole at every game, and we had to sit right beside one tonight. A line so good, it deserved its own plaque. The Cavs won, or maybe they lost. Honestly, I don't remember. The final score, forgotten. The players, they faded into memory. The Richfield Coliseum, demolished. And so, as the dust settled that night at the Richfield Coliseum, the Cavs' final score faded into history. The players moved on. The arena itself was eventually torn down and returned to farmland. But a couple things have survived. The ticket stub, it survives. Kyle still has it. A relic, a reminder, a sacred artifact of Smith history. And one other thing survived and still endures. It has become immortal. Don't ruin my fun. That one lives forever. It has echoed through decades of Smith gatherings. It's been used in arguments, in jokes, in fantasy football drafts, and probably in situations where no fun was being had by anyone. It has become a part of our family DNA, right up there with Remember Me Boys and I Don't See Mike Hill on the Horizon. It is part of the Smith lexicon now. In famous one-liners, it's right up there with Remember the Alamo. He can run, but he can't hide. Walk softly and carry a big stick. And now, don't ruin my fun. And I can't forget the sequel. Kyle's Smithsonian playback at the 1997 Fantasy Football Draft, when he resurrected the Angry Fans' original line, "Shut up and sit down."
Sit down and shut up.
History doesn't always repeat itself, but in the Smith family, it definitely rhymes. So today, I honor Jeff, the man who refused to have his fun ruined. I honor Irene, the enforcer, the protector, the deliverer of truth. And I can't forget Kyle, the witness, the recorder, the keeper of the flame. Because without Kyle, this story would have vanished. Without Irene, Jeff might have been carried out by security or on a stretcher. And without Jeff, well, I wouldn't have half the material I have for these podcasts. This is what separates the Smith from the myth. The stories, the lines, the moments that live long after the final buzzer. And somewhere out there, I hope Jeff still standing up at the games, still cheering, still living his best life. And if anyone tells him to sit down, he knows exactly what to say. Don't ruin my fun. And thanks to Irene, the unexpected enforcer, I also gained another gem. There's an a-hole at every game, and we had to sit beside one tonight. 2 iconic lines, 1 forgettable night, and 1 ticket stub that Kyle still keeps like it's a piece of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that, my friends, is what separates the Smith from the myth. Not the wins, not the losses, not the stats or the standings. It's the stories, the one-liners, the moments that become legend. And if anyone else tries to silence a Smith again, whether at a basketball game, a fantasy draft, or a family reunion, we already know the perfect response. Say it with me.
Don't ruin my fun.
Don't ruin my fun.
Jaguar. I wanna look, act, taste like a superstar. I wanna test every limit, yeah. I wanna go wild, yeah. I wanna go wild.
Don't ruin my fun.
I'm hot, you're cool. We were made to have fun. I wanna break some rules. I wanna touch the sun. I wanna test every